Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta. I'm an entrepreneur who's founded and led 2 8-figure companies. I'm also an investor, author, speaker, and lifetime learner. On this podcast, I explore stories of success in every episode and with every guest. What it means, why it's important, and of course, how it happens. You can subscribe, connect, and learn more about me at mikemalatesta.com. Hey James, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks very much, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that Philip Pfeiffer introduced the two of us. Had Philip on my podcast before. Love the stories that coaches have, and because and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I know that coaching sort of transformed your whole life. We had a conversation back in February, and I remember taking some notes on that, and then I've always sort of gotten a lot out of coaching, but I've always kind of thought of myself as a coach, but then I always talk myself out of being a coach. So I'm really interested. I'll be interested in really exploring that part of your journey, James, because I just love it.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yeah. I think I understand what you mean by talking yourself out of it.
Yeah.
Right? I remember way back when I'm in Entrepreneurs Organization. I was on a trip. I can't remember. I think it was Philadelphia. So it's like a regional event. And my friend Caesar, who's also a coach, was the chair of a program for EO called the Accelerator. It helps businesses under $1 million scale over $1 million. And he said, we need a coach for our program. And my initial reaction was like, coach, what do I know about coaching people? I mean, I'm just trying to get my act together. Like I'm falling through life, it feels like, running businesses. And it wasn't until I actually got in a room with 6 or 7 other entrepreneurs who were kind of staring at me and saying, okay, what are we going to learn from you today? It forced me to start thinking about what we'll define as wisdom, right? Like things I'd learned along the way, and forcing me to come up with content for that, and like crystallizing experiences down to like teachable moments was very impactful, not only for them, but for me, because I started realizing, oh, I do know more than I think I know, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you're always looking ahead. You're always seeing those bigger people, right?
Yeah. And you're always, I think you're always discounting what you know as well. Like if you know it, you feel like everybody knows it. It's kind of like,
yeah, and everywhere you look in the entrepreneurial community, there's someone doing better than you, right? Yes. Building a bigger business, appears to be more successful.
Correct.
And if you got a business, you might sit around thinking, gosh, when I get to that size, that's when I can start coaching and teaching people. Yeah. But that's really just head trash. Yeah. And I experienced that firsthand because I was sitting in the room with those 6 people, and after a 4-hour session, my first day, they were like, that was amazing. Like, you taught us so much. And I was like, oh, wow. So I always have to watch that thinking because it can truly get in my way.
That is so interesting because when I joined, I belong to YPO. Have you heard of YPO? So, and I joined, I don't know, doesn't matter when I joined, but when I joined, I went through that exact same thing. First of all, I wasn't sure that I should be there. So there's that maybe every time you join a new organization, but they have, dine around events and other types of events where you go to other members' homes. And I remember going to some of the homes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was doing okay, but obviously I'm, this is what I'm telling myself. Obviously I'm not, because look at this. And it takes a while. It takes deliberate practice, I think, to get that kind of thinking out of your mind. Because like you say, appearances, they may be what they look like and they may not be, but in either case, it really doesn't matter. That doesn't impact where you can go or where you want to go, or I don't know. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. I mean, we throw around that term imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And looking over all my clients, I feel very comfortable saying everybody feels that way. They might have a strong exterior. They might be larger than life in a conference room with their leadership team. But I can tell you, going to lunch or having a breakfast with these people, and the topics that we discuss, there's all kinds of emotion around it. You know, there's the feeling of one day everyone's going to find out I really don't know what I'm doing,
Right.
or I can't believe how much money I'm making. And it's a real struggle for me because my dad was an electrician. He worked himself to the bone, 60 hours a week, and never made a fraction of the money that I'm making. I don't
Right.
deserve to be here. I mean, these are very real, raw conversations I have. So that's helped me on my journey. Even when I'm walking into a leadership team for the first time, you know, I have clients doing hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And like sometimes that door is like, who am I to teach like this team?
Yes.
Like
Right.
the CEO appears to have their act together, almost maybe a bit, like a bit scary, like, like big personality, right? And so I've just learned that, and kind of maybe it's a mental model that I carry with me, that everyone has issues. Everyone is scared to some degree. And my friend Cameron Harold actually said it great in the mastermind. He said, we're all little kids in big bodies, right? And I really think that rings true. That's a really nice filter for me to look towards people, And so when I'm starting to think that, I just remember that we're all human. We all come with our insecurities. So we're all doing the best we can. So the sooner we open up to each other, and when I start every session, I have, I have a list of objectives and a list of expectations. And on the bottom of both the objectives and the expectation, it says have fun. Because we got to have fun. We got to laugh at ourselves sometimes. We got to do serious work, but then laugh at our insecurities, just laugh at ourselves, right? And that really breaks the seal. And that, I mean, we could go down a whole thread about where that leads as a leadership team, because that builds trust, right? When someone says, yeah, I'm the CMO who's kind of being buttoned up, but here's something funny or quirky about me, and maybe one of my insecurities. That's how teams kind of come together and gel more, become more human. So I try to bring that approach with all my clients as soon as I can. I'm really big on team health, like right out of the gate. I've started doing appreciation exercises with each other at the check-in, saying, what do you appreciate about Mike? What do you appreciate about Kenny? What do you appreciate about Amy? And everyone goes around, and that really helps as well. It kind of like loosens everyone up and kind of gets all those feelings, out and manageable. So
We're all little kids in big bodies. I
I
like
love it.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really good.
yeah, really good. Cameron's got some great quotes, and I was fortunate enough to sit on one of his masterminds, and it's really cool to see us have a good discussion around that.
Huh. So this is probably the longest I've ever gone in a podcast, James, without asking the question I start every podcast with, which is, how did it happen for you?
Oh my gosh, where do we start? So let me just back up,
Yeah.
make sure that everyone understands what this weird accent I probably have. People probably play. I was born in England, then raised in Florida, so I went to high school in Florida. I bounced around, professional musician for a while, and then started my first business. I was a bit of a late bloomer in business, in my late 20s. I wasn't one of those like high school entrepreneurs, started my late 20s and built a business. I ultimately sold that. And then several years ago, I bought a fire security company, and been building that and working through an exit right now. Actually, it's a very exciting time for me. But really, my story around coaching, how did that happen? Happened when I left Florida to move to Austin. I put a management team in place in my business, still active in the business, but really letting the management team kind of build up. And I was sitting around, and a friend of mine, Caesar, who I referenced before, Caesar and I were talking about, well, what was I going to do next? Was I going to jump into another business? And he said, think about everything you've done over the past several years that has given you joy. You and I have been running some EO programs together. It's teaching, mentoring people. That's where you get your energy from. And that was kind of a blind spot for me. So I sat on that for a while, really thinking about it. Very involved in entrepreneurs organization. Like I said, and ultimately ended up running that program in South Florida. I'm just ending my tenure with the EO Accelerator here in Austin. So, and I'm the president-elect for Entrepreneurs Organization here in Austin. So the main organization. I just love making an impact in the entrepreneurial community. That's my why. And so I just am thinking about it and decided, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I've been around these business operating systems, this way of thinking, since I joined EO. It's kind of built into the culture there. And so I was familiar with Mastering the Rockefeller Habits with Vern Harnish, which turned into Scaling Up with EOS, and several others. And I decided, listen, I'm going to go become an EOS implementer. So I spent a couple of years doing that and building that practice, got certified, which was at the time the highest level you can get to, and absolutely loved it. And this year I transitioned onto another business operating platform called Pinnacle. And I've just found that me being in my element and really leaning into my why has been just an explosive professional growing period for me. I've gotten amazing clients, anywhere from $1.5 million digital marketing agency up to $1 billion financial services company. And I just really feel like I'm in my element. So I've really leaned into this in the last couple of years, and I just have intense joy in watching other people succeed, even more so than myself, to be honest with you. I was on the phone with one of my clients as they were being acquired by PE. And then, I was on the phone with him as the money hit the account. I mean, you would think the money's hitting my account the way I felt. I was so proud,
Sure.
and so proud to hear, hey, this never would have happened if we didn't get our act together. We didn't understand who we are, where we're going, and create this exciting company. So for me, that was just a huge win. I just love doing the work that I'm doing.
And I want to explore Pinnacle a lot because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm really interested in coaching, and it seems like a unique program. And I don't think I've ever talked to anyone in Pinnacle. But before I get there and we spend more time there, James, I want to go back to, I saw that you went to kind of what appears to be a fancy high school at Pinecrest Prep School. I went to a fancy high school too. I'm wondering how you got there and what your experience was like there, because I want to compare it to mine. So how did you get there, and what was your experience like?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I've never gone down this thread before, so that's really interesting to me. So my parents got divorced. We were living about an hour outside of London, in the mid '80s, and my mom decided to do something completely wild, which was move her 3 kids to Florida, right, to start anew. And at the time, it was Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a sleepy beach town, which is now, it's basically Miami North.
Hmm.
And I was fortunate enough prior summers to visit Florida, and actually attended a day school a day camp at Pinecrest. So I was familiar with the place because they did like a summer program on the campus. And so we just enrolled there. I don't think it was any, further thinking other than it was a terrific school. At the time, it may be still known for its swimming program. And what was very cool is it had this international component because it had a dormitory. So you had a lot of international students. So it was great for me coming from England. As you can imagine, coming from England, an all boys boarding school, that was steeped in tradition. Have you ever seen Dead Poets Society?
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of like that without all that craziness at the end of the movie. But, it was very traditional, steeped in the same kind of uniforms, tradition, right? And then 7th grade showing up to a school with boys and girls. I mean, I remember vividly, like standing there in front of a Coca-Cola machine saying, I can buy Cokes whenever I want. What is this place, Girls everywhere asking me crazy questions at the time because I was the new kid and they wanted to hear my accent.
With the cool accent.
Yeah, they wanted to hear the accent.
Right.
And I remember the first day, the bell ringing and everyone scattered. into different places, and I was staying in the hallway by myself, you know, and I was like, ah, I don't even know where I'm going. It was such a culture shock. But I absolutely loved my experience at that school. You know, I made some of the best friends. Even I think I was talking about this the other day. I think three of my wedding party guys were the percussion section of the Pinecrest band that we were in. You know, in seventh grade.
No
I
kidding.
made I made amazing friends. I love my experience. I love the international component. I still get excited about the thought of going into my high school reunions, you know, because it was, you know, 120 people in my graduating class. So I absolutely loved it. I think it prepared me for college really well. Um, and, um, and the staff there really did care, you know, and it just felt like it was a safe place to be, with an exceptional education program, that, prepared me for college. I mean, I went off to college, and you know, I wish I could say I was a great student in college. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I put about enough effort in to pass the classes, but I mean, I passed with like A's and B's because I was so prepared for college. I knew how to take notes. I knew how to, you know, I knew how to, you know, go to classes and just be a good student, you know, from that education. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
Hmm. So yeah, my experience was um, not exactly the same, but well, before I get into mine, did you? How long did it take you once you got there to feel like you belonged there? I mean, we were talking about imposter syndrome before, and here's this kid from England that's kind of coming in, and I'm a, I'm I'm assuming that the people that are going to this school are the movers and shakers and the kids of the movers and shakers in the community. And just, do you remember how you felt and how long it took you?
Um, Gosh, it's such an interesting question because I didn't feel like I didn't belong. I do remember not really wanting to, when I first got there, speak too much because every time I said something with this thick English accent, you got to remember this was like the days of Billy Idol too, right? So I showed up to school with like some spiky hair, and I just looked a little different,
Yeah,
really into
nice.
Billy Idol, and um, and so you know, I remember asking a question, and all the focus would be on me because of my accent, but. And certainly there were the movers and the shakers. I mean, you know, when in high school, when kids turned 16, there were a lot of fancy BMW 325 I's, convertibles. There were Porsches. It was pretty wild. Um, I never, I never felt like I didn't belong. I think that I contribute that to my parents too. Like, not a flashy family when it comes to like fancy stuff.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough. My dad bought me my first car, but it was like a 5-year-old Toyota Celica hatchback that was had a lot of miles on it. It was just a regular kid car, you know. I don't really have any stories of not feeling included. You know, I had
Okay.
great friends, and again, I really think this is because there were so many Jewish kids there. You know, international students there. It just felt like very diverse. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I think going through this experience, I thought there were so many Jewish people in the world, like going through, like leaving
Oh,
Pinecrest,
sure.
because like everyone in my world, I half my friends were Jewish, and half of them were celebrating Hanukkah, half of them were selling Christmas. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do
And
know
it
what you
was just a
mean. Yeah.
wonderful, diverse. Um, like I didn't even think it was abnormal. I thought this is kind of the way the world were. Like half the world's Jewish, half the world's not. You know, it was great. You know. So um, I really did enjoy my middle and high school experience. So I'm lucky. I've got kids going through middle school and high school that struggle a bit more than I did. Um, but that's to be, that's a normal thing. Like it's not
Okay.
always the easiest places to be.
Yeah, it sounds like so. So I went to a similar school, founded 1785 in Philadelphia. Ben Franklin is one of the founders of the school. Um, and of course, I didn't know any of that when I went there. But I was going to Catholic grade school. They basically got recruited to play football at this school, and when I got there, it was like a whole different world because my parents were you know very working class, and that's where I grew up in like a Catholic parish neighborhood, with you were either Italian or Irish. That was it. That was it. And when I got there, I didn't want to go. My parents made me go because I shouldn't say made. They made a good decision for me that I was not at the time grateful for. And when I got there, I had to get remedial help. So I was put in 8th grade classes as a 9th grader, so you're kind of starting off, not so great. If I hadn't been on the football team, I think I would have been completely, lost. But for me, so coming in from that, from feeling like that, and by the time I got out, I felt like I thought like I was just as good as any person in this school. And the school made that happen. The kids actually made that happen. And all the things that I saw that I didn't have, I didn't want them, but I knew that I could get them if I wanted them. Is how my mentality was by the end. And it sounds like Pinecrest is a similar, or at least provides an environment that's similar, in addition to a great education, which, by the way, I was like way down on the list of kids. Like, I don't know where I graduated. We had 83 in our graduating class, and I was in the 30s, I think. So not stellar. But when I got to college, the kids that had AP classes at all these public schools, I found that they had no idea how to actually study. Like, I don't know what they had to do to get through, but that part was really easy, like you said. Knowing how to study, being prepared, and it actually made me lazy, James. It made me so lazy that I dropped out after a semester, and then fortunately got my act together. But anyway, point is, I love hearing stories about how people get into, especially these, selective schools and what they do with the experience, because it's such a gift, so not many people get it. And it's like, what do you do with it? And I didn't appreciate it at first, and not for a long time, actually, but now I do.
Well, we're older and wiser now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got some gray hairs on my head now, I just want to touch on something you mentioned just about being lazy, right? Like, I was a lazy student. There's no doubt about it. I think that's part of my entrepreneurial gene, right? Like, I quickly figured out who to copy notes from. I remember, so I ultimately ended up at SMU in Dallas, Texas. And I don't think I'll ever forget Chrissy Grubb, actually relocated each other on Facebook several years ago. And I was like, remember me? I copied all your notes. She said, yeah, I remember. I used to find her down at the library. She had the best notes for our marketing class. Like, she took the best notes, like big bubbly handwriting. Like, it was like reading.
Super easy to read.
Super easy, just super organized.
Yeah.
Like the way she took notes. And I was like, I just need to go to the library, borrow her notebook for 5 minutes, Xerox it, and then just study her notes. So that for me was like my hack, because I did miss classes and I didn't take the best notes, but I was, had enough wherewithal to track down Chrissy Grubb and borrow her notes and get through, SMU School of Business. With pretty good grades. I recently got my transcript. I mean, my grades were pretty good. So, I think that laziness gene is a kind of a flag for entrepreneurial spirit. Yes. I really do look at that, because entrepreneurs want to create the shortcuts, or smart cut, I think is a better word for it, right? Like, different ways of doing things. And for me, I think that was an extension of just my entrepreneurial spirit. That lazy effect is, I knew there could be a more efficient way than attending every class and like cramping my hand,
Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach calls that finding your who's.
Who, not how, right?
Yeah, who, not how, right? So it's,
no.
Entrepreneurs don't worry about the how; they find who's.
Yeah, that's a really that concept, who, not how, in the last 12 months has probably been the most impactful mental model in my life. I've really leaned into that.
It has. Okay.
Yeah. It is all about the who, right? For example, I've just leased a new session room here in Austin. and hired a designer instead of trying to do it myself, right? I'm like, how am I gonna create an amazing client experience session room, right?
Right.
No, let me go find the who. Like, whose wheelhouse is this? And then just spend the money, just invest in them. And it's been an amazing process. And I see all the renderings and I'm just like, wow, this is going to be amazing. I would have screwed it up, it would have ended up looking like a bachelor pad, you know, with like what I thought was cool furniture that was probably mismatched, but I thought looked great,
Yeah, right,
And
sure.
so, leaning into that, like I've got an amazing assistant, Camille. Um, you know, she's much more organized than I am. So she's my who as far as, scheduling and keeping me on track and sending me little notes saying, hey, you forgot to call somebody, or, you haven't spoken to this client, in a few weeks, you should probably hop on the phone. Great. That's something I don't have to worry about now because I've got that who in my life.
Right. Yeah. It's changed my thinking too. I mean, you used to think about that as delegation, but it's not delegation. It's, I like the way he talks about it being a distributed thing. Like your who's don't need to work for you, for example. They they could be, independent contractors. They could even be competitors. But on this particular project, they're a who and you're collaborating. It's all about collaboration, not necessarily about delegation or having to own all of the people and information and all of that. It's a really neat concept.
Yeah, I mean, and the word delegation comes with a bit of a power dynamic too, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, and I like that collaboration, or even giving the gift to somebody else who's sits in that unique ability,
Yes.
and bringing
Yeah.
them into your life and saying,
Yeah.
"You're so amazing at this. Can you do this for me?" It's a gift, right? So I kind of think of it like that too. Like, so don't get bogged down in the weeds. Like I just looked at the invoice from my designer. I'm like, oh, but this is the right thing to do. She's amazing. She's the right who. And ultimately, she loves what she does. I love her energy, and it's just cool. It's just
Right.
cool watching her work and allowing her to give me the gift of an amazing design.
When you said the delegation, we both said delegation, and my mind went to delegation can be, and I think I read this somewhere in your stuff where like you were sort of frustrated at some point in your entrepreneurial career where because your team just didn't get it, right? And I think all of us probably have that thought at one time or another, but delegation can be a big excuse when for things not going right too. So you can say like, "Oh, I delegated that to James, and he just screwed it up," because delegating is not about telling someone, "Hey, take this and run with it." It's really about making sure that you can't delegate something to someone where you can't describe what you want the outcome to be, right? It's so, but a lot of I know I did it lots of times. I thought, osmosis and sort of the nuances that I would use to explain something to myself were all someone needed to take whatever I wanted them to do and do it exactly the way I wanted it to do. And then I would be frustrated when it came back and it wasn't anything like that. And I would always think about it was their fault. But then it took me a long time to go, nope, you know what? I think that's my fault.
Yeah.
it, it, anyway, it made me think when you said delegation excuse.
Well, that's a very common thread among my visionary entrepreneurs, right? Very visionary. They literally see what the company could be, for example, right? Or what the department could be, or what the market opportunity is, or they can see it. And they get frustrated that other people don't get it. And they say, they just don't get what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
And then to your point, Mike, they delegate and they say, go do this because like we're on the same page, right? Like go build that. And it doesn't turn out the way they want. And so when we have those conversations in the session room about like, are you really on the same page? Like, I know we talk about, becoming the biggest this or becoming a $20 million company, this and that. And like, but do you actually see the same future together? And I've done some interesting exercises where I'd be like, okay, Mike, CEO Mike, all right, you're all, and the rest of the team, like say there's 6 of you sitting in the room, and I'd say take 30 quiet seconds, and I want you to think about where this company is going to be in 3 years, revenue wise. And I want you to write that down, that number.
Mm-hmm.
You don't change it, write it down, and let's go around the room. And I'll hear the visionary go, there may be a $10 million company, and the visionary says, I think we can be $25 million in 3 years. And then the next person goes 15, 12, 17, and there's a huge discrepancy there. How you get to 25 from 10 is very different how you get from 10 to 12, right? And continue the conversation, do some exercises, trying to identify what the company is going to look like, feel like. And there can be wild discrepancies. And it's not until we actually go through an actual workshop together where they even see the same future together.
Right.
Like literally, I'll write down 15 bullet points about okay, we all agree we're going to hit this revenue, right? And so what does the company look like, feel like? Now we've got 5 locations. The culture feels very inclusive and fun, and we got some foosball tables in our headquarter. We're on a 4-day work week. Our CEO is on podcasts and speaking. He's becoming a thought leader in the industry, and I get on the same page and see that same future. And it's usually for the visionary, it's a very emotional moment because they've been carrying around all this, like they just don't get it. And all of a sudden they hear everyone in the room around them say, we get it now. We see it together. And then that collaboration piece, going back to what you said about delegation, it should be really collaboration, starts taking effect, right? And we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And so that's a wonderful piece of the work that I get to do with my clients, is allowing that visionary to truly collaborate with his team, and for people to step up and people to step out too. Some people are like, I'm not up for this accountability, and I don't, for whatever reason, feel like I'm a fit here, which is a good thing, right? Get the right people on the bus. And I really do find from there, that's when the visionary entrepreneurs can kind of scale the business. But now they're out front and they got a self-managing business.
Right. Okay. When you you said you started your first business in your maybe mid to late 20s, I can't remember. I started mine when I was 26, and I came to a point, say probably around 10 years in, James, where we were doing well, sort of that outside, but inside I was feeling lost. And I describe it as being sort of dumping myself into a valley of uncertainty, and I was uncertain about a whole lot of things. And I was wondering, during your experience, like before all the coaching came along and stuff, did you go through something similar? Was there a time where you were like, you mentioned, I mentioned my team doesn't get it. I think I read that somewhere, but was there a time when you were like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know what to do. I need help. Was there a time that happened to you and like kind of got you on the right path, or on a path to where you are now?
So I would say my biggest point of despair was after the collapse in the late 2000s, of the financial markets, right? At the time, I had a company based near Miami that was reselling construction products from Florida into the Caribbean. So our customers were large general contractors building very large resort properties, condo towers in the Bahamas, Cayman Islands, Saint Kitts, St. Martin. And when the collapse of the entire global economy happened, literally lost 80% of my business overnight. Like truly lost my business overnight. And I made so many mistakes, right? It was so abrupt. All the credit was sucked out of the Caribbean. These developers had no money to continue their jobs, literally shut down the jobs like in one day across the entire Caribbean. And I made a ton of mistakes. I tried to hang on to my people. Well, it's like, it's got to turn around. Just give it 6 months. 6 months happened. Nothing changed. I had to let them go, which is a whole different story in itself, because by the time I let them go, some of the opportunities, as far as more employment, were gone because of, everyone is scrambled to get to a safe place. But I distinctly remember sitting at a coffee shop with one of my high school buddies and being almost in tears, saying, I don't know what to do. I had this business doing like $6 million in revenue, a whole team of people, and it's gone down to probably under 1 million. Like,
Mm.
the run rate is just crazy. And he said, you know what you need? You need to join this thing I'm in called EO. And I said, I don't know what it is, but shoot me an intro. I think the next week I was in a EO introductory lunch. I signed the dotted line. I haven't looked back. So for me, it's kind of terrifying to think of the path that I would have gone on by myself had I not found a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that first day at that lunch. And props to the folks that were running that, because they were very vulnerable too. They said, this is a safe space for you guys to be completely honest and open about what's going on in your life. I remember one of the people running it had some significant things going on with one of his kids in his personal life, and he shared that. We didn't even know each other, and I had a place I could literally be myself and say, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I don't know how am I going to continue this business without any clients? I'm gonna have to, and then I got in a great group of entrepreneurs and I figured it out. So for me, just being around other entrepreneurs sharing the same issues and concerns has been a theme in my life ever since.
Mm.
Um, so that was tremendously impactful. And so I didn't end up like sitting in the corner by myself, like trying to figure it out. I leaned out into other people. I guess in hindsight now, Mike, I found my who's, right?
Yeah,
Who can
sounds
help me?
like it.
Yeah, yeah. So it was very powerful.
And before your friend mentioned EO to you, had you been sort of one of those people who just kind of, I can do this on my own type thing, just sort of gritted through it, or did you have other resources that you had been using? Um,
No, I didn't know anything about EO. I didn't know anything about masterminds. I didn't know
yeah.
anything. I
Okay.
didn't go to the Chamber of Commerce. It was me and my business partner who relocated the business from California to Florida to pursue this opportunity in the construction sector. Left our, at the time, I was newly married. Um, my partner had a wife too in California. We both cruised down to the Miami area and got ourselves a little office and went to town. It's before we had kids, and and that was about it. But I will say, I was very fortunate to just have a great business partner. We both had strengths. He was super revenue generator, great salesman, and he could really pull in the clients. And then I had a I had a bit more sensibilities around the structures, even though I'm not like a COO type. I can do it. I can put stuff together. I just don't have a lot of energy over the long term for it.
Sure.
But combined, that both of us, we kind of plowed forward like nothing would stop us. And I think I really do owe that to my partner Todd, because he was just like sometimes just like so pie in the sky, but there was always like, if we didn't get the order or things were slow, he'd be like, I know the phone's about to ring, I know it's about to ring, I know it's about to ring. So there was a lot of that kind of energy in my office, which was really cool looking back on it. Probably took it a little bit for granted at the time, but looking back on it, I was like, you have to have someone in the office, like a partner, or even in your own head, just saying it's going to be okay. We can do this. Keep going, keep picking up the phone, keep moving forward. So I owe a lot to the who's in my life for sure.
And what ended up happening to the business? Were you able to sell it? Did it recover a bit?
Yeah.
What did,
So
what?
so it collapsed.
Okay.
It ended up just being me, my partner, and one of our employees, Mike. The three of us just kept it going, and then ultimately, I ended up selling it to Mike, my key employee. And
Oh,
to this day, that company's still going in South Florida. And it was a total win-win for the both of us. He got to run his own business with all that foundation, right? Had the banking relationships, it had the structure, had the client list and everything, and he's still running it today. I get to sit back and say, hey, that was a good run. You know, it those experiences of going through such a downturn are just invaluable to me. I wouldn't change a thing. It was truly it was just crazy. I mean, absolutely to be in any piece of construction during that time was brutal. So,
Mm.
but it really grounded me as an entrepreneur, and um, it taught me that yeah, sometimes you have to make really hard decisions. And had I done it differently, um, it wouldn't have turned out any different. But I would have been a smarter business person had I, you know, really cut my overhead faster. Um, it would have given me some more runway and a little less anxiety along the way because it got pretty ugly for a while, both professionally and personally, as far as funds and resources and bank accounts. So,
Sure.
but it turned out great.
That was interesting what you said about your people. You know, you held on to people too long. You thought you were doing them you were doing the right thing, right? Protecting your people. But then you said that, you know, had they been let go earlier, they may have had a better chance of recovering more quickly, you know, getting into a field that wasn't as devastated as as construction, you know, or in Caribbean construction. I think all construction was devastated during the Great Recession. But yeah, that was really interesting and insightful what you said there.
Yeah, you know, there were jobs to be had, and I had great people. So me keeping them around definitely delayed them kind of finding their permanent place, and also I couldn't really give them a great severance package by that point
Right.
either.
Yeah.
I mean, I do remember one of my employees, you know, cutting a check, and it was like the most I could give them, the most. I said, "This is all I can do for you. I can't pay you anymore. Like we're down to the bone here. I mean, some of this is coming out of our personal accounts at this
Right.
point, right? So I think it would have been because I would imagine this would be a really interesting conversation for me to have with those folks now. And by the way, I'm friends with most of these people still on Facebook, right? And we have a great relationship. So I'm very happy that we built such a good business where people still feel friendly towards me, right? Even though I had to let them go, we just had a lot of respect for each other. Um, but yeah, I could have done more for them in hindsight. I could have just said, listen, there's no signs this is going to turn around. You know, I can give you 3 months salary today and happy to write you any recommendation letter you want, you know, and, you know, best of luck to you instead of dragging it out where they were probably concerned the entire time
Right.
saying, there's no future here. What are we doing? You know, am I going to have a job next week and living in that limbo? I'd imagine they felt like that. I mean, who wouldn't, you know? But I was like keeping it to myself. I wasn't sharing those emotions. I probably, as a good leader, I should have brought them in a room saying, "What are we going to do here, guys? Here's option A: is you cut, we cut now and give you that severance, and I'll help you get another job and with my network as best I can. Or B, you're in it with me right now, but at the end of the day, it might be just you're leaving here with nothing, you know." So, you know, I'll do things a little differently.
Well, in fairness, it sounds like you probably had Todd in your ear saying, you know, things are going to turn around, man. This is going to happen. We're going to get this. This is going. We're close on this. You know, we're going to be able to save this. I can just imagine the optimism sort of flowing through the office as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's still like that. I really, as I'm older now, I really appreciate that energy. You know,
When you were going through that, were you thinking, "Boy, I should have just stayed a musician," kind of?
no, the music thing didn't work out. But you know, I had a really fun band out of Dallas in the '90s, and actually the guitarist in the band's on tour with Don Henley right now. He's Don Henley's guitarist, you know, from the
Oh,
Eagles. So
nice.
it's turned out well for a few of the guys in the band for sure. I think I'm the only one who doesn't make their living professionally out of the four of us play music. So, but but no, I didn't think, oh, we got, you know, so, you know, early 30s at that point, just felt like we'll figure it out, you know, and ignorance is bliss, right? It's like I was just head down, like, we got to figure this out. We got to figure this out. So,
And I think when we talked the first time, you mentioned you must have moved to Austin somewhere after the collapse of this business or the sale of it to Mike. And that was I get the impression, I think I remember that being, I think you described it as maybe the best move you ever made.
yeah, yeah, yeah. After college and moved down to Austin from Dallas in the late 90s. And my wife, which is my girlfriend at the time, we really found our happy place. We're like, this is where we want to be. My wife's an actress, so we ended up moving out to LA to give that a shot. So I started my business with Todd in LA. But we always had this feeling like next year we'll move back to Austin. Next year we'll move back to Austin. And then we moved to Florida. It was like, all right, we're going to build this thing 3 to 5 years, and then we'll move back to Austin. All of a sudden, we woke up one day and we got a kid in sixth grade, a kid in fourth grade, and a kid in first grade saying, what are we doing here? If we don't go back to Austin, we're going to have a kid in high school. We're not going to be able to move a kid in high school just because we want to. I mean, that's a big decision to pull them out of the social network and everything. And
Right.
yeah, but we pulled the ripcord on Florida. Literally, it was that feeling like, oh my gosh, if we don't do this right now, we're going to be in Florida for the next 10, 12 years until all our kids are graduated from Florida. So we flew out to Austin, started looking at some houses, and just made a pretty snap purchase, to be honest with you. We went back to Florida and said, oh my gosh, we just bought a house in Austin. This was 2016.
Hmm.
And we moved the whole family here just in the middle of a school week and jumped right into the community here. And it's been one of the best decisions we've made in our lives, like coming back to where we physically feel like home is, right? Um, and looking back on our time in Florida, we made wonderful friends. We have wonderful memories of, growing up on the beach and Disney trips and all that. But coming home, I think, is very, very important for people to feel like they are physically where they should be. I really, truly believe that. I feel very fortunate that we're able to do that.
Huh. And where's your mom now?
She's in South Florida. Yeah,
She is still.
yeah.
Huh. And did you maintain a relationship with your dad? I mean, living on separate continents and
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
okay. Okay.
absolutely. I flew back. Gosh, my grandparents, well, they both passed on now, but my cousins, my mom's side, my dad's side, and it's just me, my mom, my two siblings over on this side of the ocean, right? But all my family is over there, so we went back a lot, like every summer, spent a chunk of the summer there. When my kids were born, we took them to meet the family. We're very, you know, international in that capacity, especially when they were younger. They're older now. We don't do as many trips, but it was very important to me that they felt connected to England too. So
Right. Okay. And you mentioned maybe early on about your, in addition to the work you do at Pinnacle, which we're going to get to in a second, this fire protection company that you have. Um, that you started while you were still in Florida, or it's still based
correct.
in
Yeah,
Florida.
yeah.
Okay,
So
so
after
you've got that into the move dynamic too.
yeah, yeah. So after selling that business to Mike, that export business, I really looked at it and said, boy, there are a lot of sleepless nights, in a transactional business. Like we wake up every day and say, what are we going to sell today?
Right.
So, I was really looking for a recurring business, something with contracts and, you know, it, the wish list is like high barriers to entry,
Well, and regulation. The,
high regulation,
yeah.
gotta have it.
Right.
Even when the economy's down, even during a pandemic,
Still got to do the
you
fires.
still got to do it because if you don't
Yeah.
have a fire security system, you don't get your insurance, you can't open your building, right? So I ended up buying a mom and pop with my partner, and then we did some more acquisitions and brought them absorbed them into the business in different verticals. So we had a lot of fire alarm, and we kind of grew the fire sprinkler side of things. We bought some other alarm companies. We bought a fire extinguisher company. We bought a kitchen, a commercial kitchen call them kitchen hoods, all the
Oh, the vents.
safety
Yeah.
systems in commercial kitchens. So we brought this all together, all these together, and created this one-stop shop. Where a property manager has the same vendor for all those different verticals because it's so fragmented. The entire industry is so hyper fragmented. So tons of mom and pops, right? But able to have that one-stop shop that we could really be everything to our partners, property managers, developers, high-rise owners, and yeah, that company's done very well. And like I said before, I'm in the process of exiting that company, which is going to be a fantastic, knock on wood, a fantastic situation for all involved. So yeah, it's been a good run.
Cool. Good for you. Um, so the when I first met you, you were coaching in EOS, as you mentioned. Um, and I've had several EOS implementers on my show because I love EOS. We're in EOS. I'm an investor in EOS, so I have all these sort of connections to EOS. But you've made a change. Now you're working in the Pinnacle platform, as you mentioned, which is something I wasn't familiar with. So let's talk about what the Pinnacle platform actually is and why that's fits, why it's a good who for you, even though it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking back on the last couple of years, with the EOS, I made great friends. I love EOS. I love Traction, the books. Rocket Fuel is still one of my favorites. I love it. Um, you know, Decided to ultimately, make a long story short, ultimately decided to join another business operating system community, right? Pinnacle is, I think of it like a mastermind, right? Get together and as a group building out this business operating system, and thinking of it like kind of flipping the script a bit and saying, instead of bringing a business operating system to a client and putting them through that specific journey with those specific set of tools, why don't we ask the prospect and saying, would it make some sense for you to hire an expert to go out and bring the tools that you need now, right? Meet you where you are. And as we go through the journey from today to achieving your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Help you climb that mountain, right? Go locate the tools and resources that can really help you along the way. And I've had so many great conversations, right? Of saying, no, flipping that script. And people seem to really resonate with it, right? Because every business operating system out there has its pros, its strengths, right? I'm not even sure whether they're weaknesses, but they really lean into certain strengths,
Sure.
right? And so I can look out there and say, hey, there's this really cool tool out of this book that we can bring into the session room and facilitate a very good conversation. Because at the end of the day, my coaching days, like when I spend full days with leadership teams offsite, right? So I've just had great conversations. I frame it like that. We're gonna look at this tool together. Maybe it's a different kind of mental model, and have a conversation and see if this helps us. And that's what I love about Pinnacle. It's that constantly like consistent, endless toolbox thinking. For example, Jim Collins's hedgehog concept, right? You familiar with that? Like the Venn diagram, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
what are you passionate about? What could you be the best at the world at, right? Like, what is your niche? What is your purpose? And then what is your, what drives your economic engine, your profit per X? And that sweet spot in the middle is very powerful, right? That's what's going to get you to your BHAG. So, like, for example, putting that tool on the whiteboard and having conversations about what is the why of this business, right? And really leaning into that thread, get everyone understanding what the purpose, what excites everybody, what's the rally cry for the business, right? Like, what has brought this team together with such a great culture, but all of you aren't very clear on what it is that actually brings you together, right? And then what business are we really in, right? And that creates that lane, like focus, right? And then what is your profit per X? Like, what is that one number You know, in the great game of business, for example, they call it the critical
Mm.
number, right?
Jack
What is
Stack.
that one number, right?
Yeah.
Like Walgreens is like profit per transaction, right? And they lean into that and they just put all their decisions around, does this increase the profit per transaction, profit per customer visit, you know? So um, I love being able to bring new tools in and just to facilitate conversations of what they need in that moment, you know? And
So
so
it's
for me, that's
custom
really good.
designed. Is it's
Yeah,
you're saying it's custom designed based on the audience or the company or the group that you're working with and what they're who they are, where they're going. Is that
exactly. I mean, we
okay?
have the fundamentals, right? Like, the vision pieces, and we call them rocks, right? Like quarterly goals, like understanding where we're going and like what are the key priorities for the next year, and then reverse engineering what do we need to work on this quarter. Like we have the very tactical, but then we can also supplement it with great conversations such as using the hedgehog concept or profit first, which is great, another model. Um, you know, we traditionally think revenue minus expenses equals profit. And that book talks about revenue minus profit equals expenses, right? It's like putting a salary cap on your expenses. And it's really good because the owner's like, oh my gosh, that's good. Yeah. Why haven't I made any money out of this company? Like everyone else is making money, but I'm reinvesting everything. I want to actually put some money in my pocket, or maybe, the business should save up for a rainy day. We can have these great conversations, right? So it's got this really nice structure to it. There's definitely a framework you have to follow, but we can implement different tools. And I'm a huge team health guy. Like I shared before, like day one, I'm just like that's my thing. Day one is like I want to build upon the success of this team and lean into it and make you all feel good. Because at the end of the day, as humans, we want to feel good, right? So my sessions are a lot of team health, a lot of laughter, did Mad Libs, kind of like team health exercises, and kind of having fun together. Like we talked about before, like poking fun at each other in many ways, because these healthy teams, they are like family to a degree, and they know how to push each other's buttons and laugh at each other, and it's wonderful. So yeah, Pinnacle's been a blessing for me for sure.
Can team health be faked in your experience? Can it like they when they show up for the Pinnacle meeting or their session with you? I'm just curious how you see so many. I'm just one. I mean, I know there are people who can, and fake might be the wrong word, but they can adapt to what's expected of them in a particular environment, and then they can go back to something else, like who they really are, for example.
Yeah, it becomes apparent very quickly. And that's usually, so when we talk about people in an organization, everybody says we want great people, right? But what's great for your business, Mike, is different from what's great for my business, right? So we need to codify it. And if someone's not the right fit, assuming they're in the right seat, right? Great people are right people in the right seats. It's going to be that right people, and it's going to be a cultural misalignment. And once we
Mm-hmm.
start having these conversations and actually codifying culture, usually through the core values, right? It becomes very apparent that they're not the right fit, and that usually spurn some kind of action. So I would, I've certainly had sessions after the first day. People have left the leadership team on their own accord and being like, this isn't. I was thinking about leaving, or like, and they just pull the ripcord. I don't think it's possible to go through a process like mine and be the wrong person, because it's just going to be uncomfortable. It's not. Everyone's going to know it because we start codifying this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, looking at right person, right seat, it's very easy. XY axis, and this is from scaling up. It's called the talent assessment, right? So you've got culture going vertically and performance going horizontally, right? And then you have those quadrants, right? If someone's high culture, high performance, they're A players, right? If they're high performance and low culture, they're sitting in that bottom right hand quadrant, and I call those terrorists, right? Because they're holding you hostage because
Hostage. Right.
and I've had people like that, like in
Yeah.
sales, for example, who like crush it, and like it's a dollar. I think I'm looking at, man, that's a lot of money to the bottom line, but they're misaligned, and ultimately I'm held hostage by them. And the anecdotal evidence from my eyes is that you pull the ripcord on those people, yeah, you have to kind of suck it up as far as the revenue, but usually you find someone else who's just a good performer, high culture, to become an A player, and they sell as much. So, and everything gets better. So, I really lean into the culture piece, and they're not going to stick around if you start
Yeah.
codifying the culture. I mean, they just know they're not a right fit, and who wants to hang out in a room with where you don't feel comfortable?
Right. Yeah, that has so been my experience too, James. If you've got this high performer, low culture, it's scary to let that person go because, or move on, or help them transition to something better, whatever you want to call it. Because, well, it can be money. In the case of a salesperson, it can be tribal knowledge or really good relationships with clients, but not so great relationships with colleagues. And it's hard to make that choice, but or decision. But I found, and I always wait too long. But I found that when you finally make it, the person you get to replace that person, you're looking and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I put up with X so long when why this person was out here? And, I just thought that no one could be as good as the person I had. And that fear kept me sort of locked down.
Yeah, and the real sad piece about this, Mike, and I've been guilty of this too, right? So I'm just using you as an example,
Yeah.
but most likely the rest of your organization was standing around saying, "What is
Yeah.
taking Mike so long?"
Right.
I mean, he talks
Right.
this game about culture and but so it erodes trust with the entire team. And believe it or not, that people I hear about it. In my experience, I've seen it. I see it with my teams. You let that person go, and everyone rallies around and says you did the right thing, and they end up finding someone else comes to the organization. They love the culture. They're high performers, and you're off to the races. That's how you scale. So I can't think of a better word than terrorist, or maybe a kidnapper or something, because they really are holding you hostage, like your growth, your culture, and everything. So
It's funny too when people talk about coaches, they are always thinking about what a coach can teach you, and so often, and coaches do teach. I mean, you were talking about all these different things you bring, these customized things you bring to your groups, but the other thing you bring is just you already know the answer to this. I'm just going to help you keep focused on the answer, because if you're left to your own devices, you will ignore the answer because a little bit of that the pain of ignoring it you assess to be less than the pain of dealing with it, when it's often the other way around.
sure, no, you
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head, right? And I tell my teams all the time, I really do believe this. I'm not a consultant. I don't go in there with like answers for them. I just facilitate the conversations for them to come up with their own answers. I give them tools, lenses, filters, mental models, right? To have great conversations, and make their own decisions. I tell them all the time, I'm like, 95% of all the wisdom needed to grow this business into what you want it to become, whether that's scale or whether that's to be the best small business, best marketing agency in Austin, right? Whatever it is, whatever your end goal is, 95% of wisdom is already in the room here.
Yeah.
We just need to harness that human energy and get you all on the same page, have very honest dialogues with each other. Um, you know, it's amazing just to see that shift. Like, I mean, I've had, CEOs who are very high drive, and they think they're listening. They ask a question in the room, but they're not really listening. They're just creating space, but they ignore really what they're hearing. And there's a culture of that. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, hold on a second, Mr. CEO. Like, you said you want to listen. Well, so Susan, you're kind of fidgeting over there when you're saying that. What do you have to say?
Yeah.
Really? Like, is it okay for me to say this? Yes, say it. He brought me in to make sure to elevate you all to build his business, right? Yes, I did. Okay, great. What do you have to say? Susan says something, and it's like, wow. And the CEO's like, wow, that's an amazing idea. Okay, cool. And so I start pulling that out of the team and bringing it together, right? They're successful already. I'm not, and I always tell them this too. Like, we're building on a foundation of success. So, hand clap to get this far. But like, imagine what we can do if we have a truly healthy team. And Patrick Lencioni, in Five Dysfunctions, the first layer, the foundation of a healthy team is trust.
Mm-hmm.
And his book is about the lack of trust is a dysfunction. So we have to lean into that. You have to say what's on your mind. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to disagree. But you have to get it out. You have to talk about it. So we do a lot of work around that, like really saying, well, I mean, again, going back to my objectives and my expectations, the first two things in expectations is open to changing your perspective, open to changing your mind, and honest, saying what needs to be said, respectfully challenging each other. So yeah, it's great work. I love it.
Well, this has been so interesting spending an hour or so with you, James. Thank you for coming on. I know your website is your name, jamesashcroft.com. Is there other ways that you want people to connect with you or reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, so you just can look me up, James Ashcroft. And I would love people to reach out and email me and just, check in, ask me a question. If you're, if you're not in Austin, Texas, and you're just looking for a coach, for example, I'm happy to reach out to my network to find you a coach in your local area. I know a ton of great coaches. So I truly am doing this to impact the entrepreneurial community. So if I can help in any way, please reach out. I'm happy to help you in any way I can, even get on the phone, have a conversation. I want to lean into my why.
Got it. And your email is James at
jamesashcroft.com.
Simple as it gets.
Simple as it gets. There's a whole story behind how I had that domain and lost it and got it back. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, I had it like, probably mid early 90s or something when the internet was going, got my name, and I forgot to renew it, went to junk spam, and I kicked myself for like 10 years. As the internet grew, I was like, James Ashcroft, I looked up the guy, he on jamesashcroft.com, .net, everything, wasn't doing anything with it. And I got one of those, auction sniper domain name capture things when they drop, so I put like $100, I bid on it, and just one quiet morning got an email saying, congratulations, you got jamesashcroft.com.
Oh, so he did the same thing. He forgot to renew or whatever.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a domain, go to like Snap Names or one of those things and plug in and forget about it, set and forget. And you'll be surprised that one day you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I got, Mike.com.
I never heard of that. So it's called Snap Names, you said?
I think the one I use is Snap Names. There's a bunch of them. I think GoDaddy does it as well. They all do it now, where you pay a premium fee, and they basically, as it drops the renewal, it just goes in and grabs it for you.
That is so interesting.
So yeah, I was very, very happy to have my own name. Felt like I was home again on the internet. I was like, for a while, some guy hijacked my identity. It felt like so. So I did that with all my kids' domains too, and got 2 of them by following that process. So.
Oh, you did? Okay. I was fortunate to get mine without that, but I have a weirder last name. Yours.
Yeah, all the Ashcrofts are in England. So
right.
It was an English guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations on your new Pinnacle platform. Congratulations on the pending sale of your business, which is always a phenomenal event. And this one sounds like a much better spot than you were dealing with your previous business. So congratulations on that, and congratulations on being in Austin, where you belong.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a real pleasure. I loved your questions, and we should do it again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.